the Expressway, and the train station. The most haunting story in The Power Broker, Robert Caro's Pulitzer Prize-winning history of New York, traces a singularly powerful man's determination to jackhammer an expressway across the South Bronx. Caro's subject, Robert Moses, was at the peak of his imperious glory when he decided during the mid-1950s to dig what amounted to a cavernous trench through some of the Big Apple's most vibrant working-class neighborhoods. Nearly everyone objected. Even the mayor had taken sides with a parade of citizens, community groups, and elected officials begging the great man to modify the route. But those pleas fell on Moses's deaf ears, and by the point of The Power Broker's celebrated release 2 decades later, the Cross-Bronx Expressway had effectively turned a once lively and multicultural section of the globe's financial capital into an urban wasteland. Caro's telling of the horrors, Moses blithely imposing his will on enfeebled citizens, was not only damning, but indicative of why by the time of the book's publication in 1974, the public had turned against public authority. In nearly every realm, those wielding power in government appeared impervious to objection, high-handedly dismissing anyone with a moxie to raise a stink. Whether it was Richard Nixon's corrupt efforts to keep his hold on the White House, or the Pentagon lying about Vietnam, or Moses raising whole parts of New York without any mind to his victims, what had come to be called the establishment seemed, by the 1970s, to have run completely amok. The Power Broker was simply the most erudite treatment of how public authority had gone awry. By that point, no one really doubted that it had. In 2013, I reread The Power Broker during my weekly train commute to New York. At the end of each journey, following the conductor's announcement that we'd arrived in Manhattan, I would close the book, gather my belongings, and climb up into the daylight through the dingy, fetid basement corridors that serve as the city's front door. At the time, more people traveled through New York's Penn Station each weekday than traversed the region's 3 airports combined. And yet, while the station had originally been described by the New York Times as the largest and handsomest in the world, its turn-of-the-century grandeur had been raised in 1963 to make room for the eyesore known as Madison Square Garden. A once magnificent station was left to occupy the warren of dimly lit corridors below. And each time I traipsed through, I asked myself, why hasn't anyone fixed this? Why was New York allowing its most important gateway to fester as a rat's nest? Penn Station was not the only example of New York's torpor. Decades earlier, Moses had built all sorts of things, and often in short order. Not only neighborhood-destroying highways, but parks and bridges and tunnels, and apartment buildings, and major cultural attractions, Lincoln Center, the United Nations headquarters, the world's fairgrounds in Queens, and, perhaps most celebrated, Jones Beach on Long Island. Venerated by many, he was, even then, considered a villain by others. But following the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge's opening in the late 1960s, the same time as it happened that Moses was stripped of his last remaining influence, the city had essentially stopped building new infrastructure. And that left me curious. What had changed? Why hadn't the globe's second most heavily trafficked transit hub been reimagined or redeveloped? Why had it been so easy for Moses to pursue bad projects when it was now so hard to complete good ones?